everybody. Earl at thelogbook.com, back for more Voyages of Shelf Discovery. And these guys, let me tell you, they are just the worst. I am finally going to get around to opening a couple of figures that I ordered a couple of years ago, as crazy as this sounds, and then boxed them up because I thought I was going to have to move. And they were not in a box that had other figures in it. I totally forgot about them. Which, that's the sort of thing that makes you maybe rethink your collecting a bit. It's like, okay, if I forgot about these, why were they even here? The fact of the matter is, they got packed in with books, and I have no excuse. It's time to finally open them. The worst is part of the ReAction figure line, but these characters are not from a movie, they're not from a comic, these are Super 7 originals, which that's a very smart idea. Super 7 spends so much time, and I'm sure a ridiculous amount of money, licensing other people's stuff. They might as well try out some of their own characters. Try to create something of their own. And out of all the characters, the worst is kind of like this, not really the Doom Patrol, the Doom Squad or whatever. They're the worst. But I always found this idea of brain in a jar wearing a uniform. How can you not love that? And so at some point I got a 2-pack of these guys. One in the original white uniform, one in the black uniform with like the bloody dome. And again, what is not to love about a brain in a jar walking around and probably giving orders? And they're probably not good orders. They're probably the worst orders. You can see there was a whole lineup of characters, not all of which really grabbed me, but Brain Boys here definitely grabbed me. I always try to remember that especially with these, they're not licensed properties. Okay, this character doesn't exist elsewhere. I want to try my hardest to preserve the backing card artwork on this and not tear it to shreds when I open the guy. So let's go ahead and get the bubble off of there as carefully as we can. Now, I have 2 shots at this because it's the same backing card, basically 2 paint variations of the same character. And so here is our white uniform guy. He's got a black gun. Okay, so the Brain Boys will just straight up shoot you if you offend the pulsating mass of their brain. Okay. I would say I have known people like that, but they weren't even brains in jars. What's their excuse? The same articulation, well, okay, almost the same articulation as an old school Kenner Star Wars figure. The heads do not move, the brains do not move. So there is one less point of articulation than you would have with a typical Kenner Star Wars figure. So think of these Cortex Commanders, is what they're called. Cortex Commanders. I keep calling them Brain Boys. You think of them as having the same amount of articulation as, say, Chewbacca in the original Kenner line. You couldn't move Chewie's head. Why would you need to move his head? So these are kind of the same things. You have the hip joints, you have the shoulder joints. That's it. They're the Brain Boys. What more do you need? Alright, so our bloody dome brain guy in his black uniform, his gun is kind of this light gray, which, alright. I'm not sure I ever really nailed getting the card open with minimal damage here. Not a very good demonstration of that. So my apologies. They should sell posters of the artwork. Come on, Super 7, you can have that idea for free. Who wouldn't want the uniformed brain, hanging up like a piece of fine art in their hallway? Just hang it up in the bathroom. People go in there and they're like, what? Oh, by the way, these bubbles are kind of coffin-shaped, so if you trimmed them down, taped them together, maybe paint over them or something, hey, then you've got an action figure-sized coffin. I mean, keep it out of the landfill. That's my advice. So let's take a look at the Cortex Commanders. Detailing is really good on these. It's, for something that's so silly, that is not burdened with having to resemble something from a film or a comic or a show. A lot of detail, a lot of thought went into these. Now, you may be questioning, okay, so you've got a couple of Cortex Commanders, but you don't have any other specimens of the worst. Where are you going to display these guys? Well, the clue is in the uniform design, because it looks like, and I'm going to try to word this very carefully so, the algorithm doesn't ban my video. The kind of flared out uniform legs do bear a certain resemblance to, shall we say, some of the bad guys from World War II. And that same design cue was picked up on by the costume designers of Star Wars in creating the Imperial uniforms. And so, this really seems like brains in a jar walking around in some kind of life support system that resembles a humanoid body. That seems like a very Imperial thing to me. Come on, we're talking about people who apparently had some long-term plan to somehow bring Palpatine back without many more bullet points on that particular action item than that line from The Rise of Skywalker. So, yeah, I could totally see the Empire saying, you know what, yeah, we're gonna have some executive advisors. They happen to be brains in jars because we're trying all this cloning stuff. We're trying all this, genetic manipulation stuff. Well, okay, we couldn't get hold of Grogu. These are going to be the next best thing. So, there you have it. The Cortex Commanders from the worst. Quite amusing. I seem to remember there was a special on getting these two, and that's why I finally pulled the trigger and got myself some Brain Boys, and I harbor absolutely no regrets.